Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 41 of Pucks and Brews, aka the Stanley Cup playoff predictions for the first round of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. I am your host, as always, Michael Shade Sparacino, alongside, as of now, as always, Liam the Chellmaster Godimer. Liam, it's a glorious day, isn't it?
It's a glorious day. It's a glorious day to talk hockey, as it is every day. And the playoffs are upon us, Shades, and I can't wait to get going.
Yes, and it's going to be an even more glorious day tomorrow because we're recording right now on Sunday, and tomorrow's Monday, the games start, and it's going to be even more glorious on Tuesday because Rangers Devils game one. I am pumped.
Oof. I'm pumped. I don't think my heart's ready, but I'm ready.
I already know I'm not emotionally ready because playoffs is when I yell at the TV. The regular season, I get upset, but playoffs is when I start yelling. So
We'll see. We'll see.
we will see. And a cool tidbit of news earlier today. Uh, my alma mater, St. Francis College, the men's tennis team, in their last ever match, won the Northeastern Conference Championships. So, gentlemen, with that being said, I would like to cheers a salute to not only everyone listening, but to the St. Francis men's tennis team for winning the Northeastern Conference. And it's time to take a sip because it's pretty damn humid and I am hot.
Salute. I heard
Ah,
about cutting down all their athletic programs. That's
yeah,
they were able to go out with a win. That's good.
yeah, I'm so happy. It's so bittersweet too, knowing that they got it done in their last ever chance, but also knowing, it's not going to happen anymore. But yeah, that one's hitting me in the feels a little bit all day. But we're not here to talk tennis as much as I like tennis in general. We are here to talk the Stanley Cup playoffs. And without any further ado, let's get right down to it, shall we, Liam?
Let's do it.
All right.
So where
So,
are we starting? East, west?
oh no, we starting out in the West, Cowboy.
Okay.
So we're gonna start off with the Minnesota Wild versus the Dallas Stars. And well, Dallas has low-key been kind of on fire lately. They finished the season 10-2-1 in their last 13. The trade acquisitions at the deadline seem to be paying off right now, especially Ryan Reeves, which is actually kind of funny when you think about it, because he's not known to be an offensive player, but he just seems to have sparked something. Did I? No, that was the Wild. Excuse me. Excuse me. I see. This is why I need the cold brew.
I
The
was gonna say something, but I was like, let me.
I usually figure it out, but yeah. Anyway, this is what. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the mishap, but yeah, cold brew. That's what it's here for. So the Dallas Stars, like I said, finished the season 10-2-1 in their last 13. A very uh I don't want to say underrated move, but a move that very much flew under the radar for them at the trade deadline, which is in what you said, Liam, and now I'm agreeing with you, is the trade for Max Domi.
It was a big trade. And you know what? You'd be hard pressed to look at any team that was on the cusp of the playoffs. And I think at the time, Dallas was first in the Central Division. Anybody is going to need a Max Domi in their lineup. A top six forward, a guy who can really slot in anywhere. If you have a lot of depth up front, he can be a third line player. He provides that physicality. He's a playoff type performer. I thought it was going to be a big time get from the get go. And it was. And you know what, Shade's looking at this roster and looking at this series. Look, I want to give Minnesota a chance, but I just look at Dallas. They're a hot team right now. They got arguably, maybe Connor Hellebuck gives them a run for his money, but arguably Jake Ottinger is the best goaltender in the Western Conference right now in this playoffs. Their defense is good as well. There's veteran leadership in Ryan Suter. Miro Heiskanen has had an underrated season. I think Niels Lundqvist, as much as I wouldn't like to admit it, and probably you wouldn't like to admit it, he's looked good since coming over from the Rangers. Esa Lindell, I like a lot. Colin Miller as well. I think this is a complete team. I like their coaching too. Look, I think that the Dallas Stars are not going to win the Western Conference. I don't even think that they'll get to the conference final, but I think that it's a really good matchup for them going up against Minnesota, a team that doesn't have a lot of goaltending. Yes, their acquisitions have come in and really molded well to complete the team, but I just can't take Minnesota at this juncture. For me, Dallas has been leading the Central for most of the season, and this should be a cakewalk. I think Minnesota is going to win in 6. I mean, Dallas is going to win in 6. See, I messed up too.
Yeah,
Some about this
it's
series.
contagious. It's very much contagious. But like you just said, the trade deadline acquisitions for the Wild are meshing well, especially the Ryan Reaves for Minnesota. There we go, Mike. You're doing good. And as well, they also acquired Gustav Nyquist, Marcus Johansson, and Oscar Sundquist, as well as John Klingberg, which was a little bit puzzling for them because Klingberg is, let's be honest, not having the best of seasons. But the other moves on paper, you and I were both, we weren't exactly raving about them, but we were just like, yeah, those are some decent moves for the Wild. But in the long run, the Wild finished the season losing 5 of 7. And just for reference throughout the episode, I am going to be all over the place with the team's record in the final however many games. So prepare yourselves, especially you, Liam, because you only know like 2 of the series that I got up to with this when we were talking beforehand. But yeah, in the long run, I think Jake Ottinger performs extremely well again. And a major tipping point in this series for me was just looking at Minnesota's all around roster on paper. I do not like their center depth at all. And while I do think that they have good players to be playing center, it's just I look at other teams around the league and I go, no, I'm not taking Minnesota's center depth. But Stars in 6 is my official prediction as well. So I share that with you. And yeah, that's about all I got on that series. You got anything else?
Yeah, just to go over what you were talking about with Minnesota. Again, their center depth is pretty pathetic, to be honest. I mean, Ryan Hartman, I think, is a pretty good center, but I don't think he's a first-line center. I don't think he's a second-line center either. Freddie Gaudreau, who they just signed to a pretty long-term extension at a pretty decent AAV. Again, he's a fourth-line center as well. Sam Steele has had a pretty good year after playing with Anaheim over the last couple years. So again, I think that their center depth is lacking, like you mentioned. I think that their forward group is good, though. I love Kaprizov. I love Zuccarello. I think Johansson is a good forward as well. Matt Boldy, we know how good he is. Ryan Reaves as well. We know how much he can impact the game when he's on his game. Of course, didn't play that well for the Rangers in last year's playoffs. And then you look at the defense, again, John Klingberg arguably having his worst season of his career. But Spurgeon, Brodin, Dumba, and Middleton, those are pretty decent four defensemen. I just think it's just not a good matchup going against this Stars team. And if you compare the center depth, lastly, Shades, of the Stars and the Wild, you look at the Stars, they have Joe Pavelski, you have Rope Hintz. There are a number of centermen on that team that completely outduels those aforementioned centermen I was talking about with the Wild. So I think it's a foregone conclusion. Could be Stars in 5, but I'll lock it in at Stars in 6.
All right, sounds good. And yes, I as much now that you brought up Zuccarello before we move on to the next series, I have to say that I did in fact bring a Rangers jersey to have right next to me, and it is Matt Zuccarello. For anyone who can see, I will try and there we go. So yeah, good luck. Good luck to Minnesota, but I see Dallas taking it. And now that's all I have.
That's all I have as well. All good.
On to the Los Angeles Kings versus the Edmonton Oilers. Well, Liam, we mentioned this last episode. The Oilers are kind of on fire, and I feel like that's not even a good enough term because in their last 21 games, they went 18-2-1.
Yep, there it is.
Now we have a saying for wrestling fans that a team or a wrestler can get white hot, which means as hot as you can possibly be, as popular as you can possibly be at a particular point in time. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with the Oilers, because ever since that trade for Matthias Ekholm, he was literally the missing piece for them. Or at least that's how it's looking like right now. And let's not also forget that they acquired Nick Bukestad too, and in the process traded away Tyson Barrie, who I didn't really think was a good fit for that team in the first place, and Jesse Puljujarvi, a former 4th overall pick. I
Yeah.
apologize for the pause there.
No, that's okay. I was actually unmuting my mic. Of course, it has to happen once every episode. But like you mentioned, their trade deadline acquisitions. Look, I like Nick Bukestad a lot. Again, he adds to the center depth. Again, a big forward to add to their group. Again, Matthias Ekholm. Again, I mentioned it last episode. Just what the doctor ordered for this defense, and now you combine Ekholm with Darnell Nurse, who's having a good year, still overpaid, yes, but having a good year. Evan Bouchard's having one of his best years early on in his NHL career. Vincent Desharnais, who not a lot of people know about, but he's kind of been a revelation, 26 years old, 6'6", 209 pounds. He's been pretty good for them on the back end. Stuart Skinner, I think it stops and starts with Stuart Skinner and the goaltending as to why the Edmonton Oilers have had so much success and went on that 18-2-1 run at the end of the regular season to, finish the year. I mean, Skinner has just been outstanding. He's only getting paid $750,000, and he went out with a 29-14 record, a .913 save percentage, and a 2.75 goals against. For a team that Mike Smith just wasn't getting it done for them. There's the ESPN location notification that comes on every single time. But yeah, no, look, I really like Stuart Skinner. I think he's going to be their number one. And if he falters, again, it's a situation where they have a 1B to pick up the pieces and Jack Campbell as well. So I'm going to take Edmonton to win this series over the Kings. And again, they faced off last year, I believe, in round one as well. And it was Edmonton winning in 6 games. I think it's going to be the same result. Oilers in 6 again.
Was it 6 or 7 last year?
I believe it was 6, but I can double check. It was 7 last year, but I'm going to take the Oilers in 6.
All right. Well, we brought up the Oilers' big acquisition at the trade deadline. The Kings also had a very interesting one. They traded Jonathan Quick and then brought in Jonas Korpisalo, who, I mean, we were all raving about how good of a trade that was for them. But in the long run, the Kings lost 5 of 9 to end the season. Like I said, I told you I was going to be all over with these numbers. And I mean, I can't bet against McDavid right now with the heater that he's on, the historic season that he had, the way the Oilers in general have been playing. And don't get me wrong, the Kings have a good team, but Edmonton is just red hot right now. My official prediction is Oilers in 5.
Oilers in 5. Yeah, and I think that there's definitely an argument to go lesser games. Look, I like the LA Kings. I think that they're building something really good coming out of their rebuild, with young players like Quentin Byfield, Matty Anderson, of course, the goaltending, Jonas Korpisalo, who they acquire at the deadline. I think that was a goaltender that they could have really used. And I think they got a slam dunk. They just got a bad matchup in round 1. They're just facing off against an Edmonton team that's red hot. They have the best player in the world on their team, and they have the most lethal power play in the world. And you know what? You look at what really makes the difference in the postseason shades, it's special teams, and Edmonton really rocks the boat when it comes to their power play, even without Tyson Barrie, who ran things prior to the trade deadline and subsequent acquisition of Matthias Ekholm. So look, I like both teams, but I think the Oilers are going to win this series in 6 games.
Notice how we did not even bring up Zach Hyman, Evander Kane, or Leon Draisaitl throughout all of that. That's how confident we are in the Oilers against the Kings this year.
Yep. And Zach Hyman and Evander Kane, for me, just add to that depth for the Oilers. And, it's been a combination of things for the Oilers, right, in their last few playoff runs as to why they haven't had success. Sure, you can point at the goaltending. You can look at Mike Smith. Everybody loves to point at the defense, which is warranted. But for me, like it is with a lot of other team shades, it was the lack of depth in their forward group. And I think they have that now. And I think Leon Draisaitl is having a great year. I think Nugent Hopkins with a 100-point season, who we didn't mention either. You didn't even mention him in the secondary thing on the Oilers, the 100-point Ryan Nugent Hopkins. Again, their depth is unbelievable. Zach Hyman was a great player for the Leafs. Again, not a great contract, but again, he's paying dividends for the Oilers right now. And I just think that the Kings are too young of a team. Their time is coming. It's not right now. It's the Oilers' time, and they're going to win this series.
Yeah, so Liam, you have them Oilers in 6. I got them in 5 over the Los Angeles Kings.
You know what? I'm looking at my bracket right now on NHL.com, and I did this before the episode started. I actually put Edmonton in 5, so switch me back to Edmonton in 5. I'm going to stick with my original gut prediction, not change it.
As the host and executive producer of this podcast, I will allow it because it is your official bracket.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. And let's move on to the third series, shall we?
Shall we? Let's do it.
Next up, the Colorado Avalanche versus the Seattle Kraken. And I was when I was going through my notes before this, for whatever reason, I had it in my head that the Avalanche were playing the Jets, and I don't know why. And then I checked, thank God. I couldn't have been more wrong. But the Avalanche, the reigning and defending Stanley Cup champions from last year, they didn't make a whole lot of moves in season. I mean, they got Matt Nieto, Rangers legend Jack Johnson, and they got Lars Eller back. But the big move for them came last offseason when they acquired Alexander Georgiev from the New York Rangers in a move that I was laughing at them for, but I'll eat my words as of now. He has played pretty well this season. So I got to give credit where it's due. And the Kraken, honestly, outside of the Oliver Bjorkstrand trade last offseason and the Ellie Tolvanen claim during the season, which provided a nice spark for both him and the team, I still got the Oilers. I still got the Avalanche coming out on top here.
Yeah, for me, I have the Avalanche coming out on top as well. Look, I look at the Seattle Kraken team. Again, it's a team that's up and coming, a lot like the Kings. Look, I'll run it down. Matthew Beniers having a career season, one of the best two-way centers in the league already. And he is such a young player. Like, he is really that good as a two-way centerman. Yanni Gourde, we love to rave about Yanni Gourde, how good he was with the Lightning. He's been a great pickup, even at 30 years old for the Kraken. Morgan Geekie, Alexander Wenberg, Jordan Eberle, remember him with the Islanders, how productive he was. Oliver Bjorkstrand, we praised that move in the offseason when that trade was made with the Columbus Blue Jackets. You look on the back end, Vince Dunn is having a breakout season. Adam Larson, a part of one of the most lopsided trades in NHL history with Taylor Hall, but still a good piece to the back end of the Kraken nonetheless. Jamie Alexiak provides size. Carson Soucy, toughness, same thing. Justin Schultz had some great years in the playoffs with the Penguins going back a few years ago. The one concern for me is playoff inexperience and goaltending. That's what worries me about the Seattle Kraken. And I got to ask myself, does Philip Grubauer or Martin Jones, who's currently injured right now, give my team a chance to win against the Colorado Avalanche, even without Nazem Kadri, of course, who left in the offseason, and Gabriel Landeskog as well, who's out for the postseason due to an injury? I still don't see it. So I think Colorado is going to win this series with relative ease. And what did I have prior to the show? Colorado in 5, and I'll stick with that.
Man, we're going to almost mirror our predictions, aren't we? Because I also have the Avalanche in 5. And just because I'm going to keep this theme going throughout the whole episode, or at least most of it, the Avalanche finished 16-2-1 in their last 19. And the Kraken were 14-7-2 in their final 23. So not bad, but also not terrific.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think with the pedigree of the Colorado Avalanche, what they were able to do last year, they've been here before. Kraken are a great story, don't get me wrong, but you can't have your two holes against this Colorado Avalanche team be inexperience and goaltending. It's just not going to match up. So I think it'll be a quick series. But congrats to the Seattle Kraken on a great season. Yeah. And I think that they really are going to improve in the next few years. Great to see expansion teams, of course, first with Vegas and now with the Kraken, having success. So that's great.
Yeah, it really is great to see. But Kraken, your time is coming, but it's not yet.
Agreed.
And lastly, the final playoff series in the Western Conference, going in the order that I wrote them down in for no particular reason. We have the Vegas Golden Knights against the Winnipeg Jets. And remember what I said last offseason or last year about the Knights?
What'd you say?
I said the only reason they missed the playoffs was because of how injured they were. And, well, lo and behold, that proved to be the case throughout the course of the season.
It did. And Vegas, again, they were pretty injured this year as well. And they made the coaching change that I think they needed to make, regardless of all the injuries from a year ago. I think that they needed to change a head coach. And they bring in Bruce Cassidy, who had his issues in the Boston Bruins locker room, but I think that was one of the greatest head coaching changes on both sides in NHL history. Jim Montgomery going to the Bruins, having a historic season, and Bruce Cassidy going to Vegas and leading them to the Pacific Division title. So yeah, look, Vegas, I think they're a stacked group. I think on defense, Alex Pietrangelo is great. Shea Theodore has transformed into a number one defenseman. Of course, up front, they get Mark Stone back. What kind of Mark Stone are we going to get coming off of that back surgery? I'm not entirely sure. Jack Eichel as well. He had a pretty decent season. I think landed around 70 points in around 65 plus games. So more than a point per game player, but I still think you'd want a little bit more out of Jack Eichel. William Karlsson had a good year as well. Even depth guys like Brett Howden, as much as we wouldn't like to admit it, have had a decent year for the Vegas Golden Knights too. But again, what concerns me with Vegas, Shades.
Another Rangers legend.
What concerns me with Vegas, Shades, exactly what concerned me with the Seattle Kraken, is the goaltending. And right now it's Laurent Brossoit and Jonathan Quick. Of course, Logan Thompson, his availability for the postseason is a little topsy-turvy. He was dealing with an injury at the end of the year. He probably will start game one against the Winnipeg Jets, I would imagine. But if they have to go to Jonathan Quick or they have to go to Laurent Brossoit, that is what concerns me. But the entirety of their group otherwise, Bruce Cassidy is a great coach. They have so much depth on the blue line and up front. Didn't even mention Alex Pietrangelo as well on the back end. Young guys like Paul Cotter, Teddy Bluger, who they acquired at the trade deadline. Nick Waugh, who played well for them. Chandler Stevenson, Phil the Thrill Kessel, Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith. So again, Ivan Barbashev, who they got from the St. Louis Blues. So there's a ton of depth on this team. So if their goaltending can stand up, I think they'll do well in the playoffs. But I'll hold my prediction just for a moment.
All right. And because you mentioned the guys that they brought in, like Barbashev, like Teddy Bluger, like Jonathan Quick, let's not forget that they traded away Max Pacioretty last offseason for, rest in peace, future considerations. I always love saying that.
It's
And even
unbelievable.
whatever.
It's unbelievable because they traded both Marc-Andre Fleury and Max Pacioretty for nothing. And it didn't bite them. It didn't bite them. Max Pacioretty's been out ever since they moved him, and Marc-Andre Fleury faced that severe regression that, again, he came off of the Vezina Trophy winning season, and then he's had some really downswings in his career. So again, it's really amazing that it hasn't bit them in the behind. But continue.
Yes. And you brought up Mark Stone being out for the Knights again, which is just unfortunate, but
he's back.
Oh, he is back.
Yeah, so he had back surgery, and they're bringing him back for the playoffs. And again, it's the LTIR controversy where they bring him back right at the start of the playoffs. But again, the counter argument to that is if you look at who Vegas brought in at the deadline, it's not like they brought in $8.5 million Timo Meier. They brought in Ivan Barbashev. They still have to make it work under the cap, but it's not like there was some serious cap maneuvering there. But yeah, Stone is back and should play game one against Winnipeg.
So speaking of the moves that the Knights made, the Jets they really just made two minor moves. They swapped a depth roster player for Vladislav Nemesnikov, and they brought in Nino Niederreiter, who you and I were both raving about that trade for them when it happened. But now I'm going back to my good old how did they finish the season trend. The Winnipeg Jets finished the season 14-14-2 in their final 30, stumbling into the playoffs where they almost got caught by the Nashville Predators, which I wanted to see so badly, but it didn't happen. And the Knights, surprisingly, in their final 22 games went 16-3-3, which I was shocked at because, we've already talked about the Oilers and the Avalanche and how they finished the season. Excuse me. The Knights were right behind them in pace-wise, which I didn't hear anything about this. So when I saw that and did my independent research of just looking back at the schedule, I was just like, holy crap. Now, I will say this, which I should have said at the beginning of the episode. My games may be off by a game or two in the win or loss column, but I did the best I could on making notes as quickly as I could. But it's time for the official predictions. I think that the Winnipeg Jets will take this to 7 games, but ultimately I see the Knights winning in 7.
I also think that the Winnipeg Jets are going to take this to 7 games, but I think that Winnipeg is going to win.
Interesting.
I think the Jets are going to win the series. I think they have the best goaltender in the West. Right up there with Jake Ottinger. I really think it's a coin toss of who you like better, whether you like Hellebuck or Ottinger. But I think a hot goaltender can really lead you places. And yeah, it does concern me. I'm not going to lie, how hot Vegas was down the stretch. Exactly, precisely as you displayed the statistics in the last number of games to end the regular season. But again, I look at this Winnipeg Jets team, and there's a lot of pieces of it that I like. I think Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers, I think that winger pairing, again, those are two of the best wingers in the league and very underrated, both of them. Pierre-Luc Dubois, as much as we like to talk about him as a locker room cancer, he's quietly having one of his best years of his career. He's having a nice 63-point season in 73 games. A lot of people wrote him off as like a mid-second line center. He's produced, 24 years old still, young player. Of course, Mark Scheifele as well. He's struggled a little bit this year, 68 points in 81 games, but he's still a top-line guy. Vladislav Nemestikov, that's your second-line center, concerns me a little bit. Blake Wheeler, you have veteran leadership in that forward group. I love Lowry, Niederreiter, and Appleton. I think that's a great third line. Morgan Barron, Kevin Stenlund, and Saku Menelainen. That's your fourth line. So again, there's some depth there as well. And Josh Morrissey on the back end's having the best year of his career. Yes. And again, he was the front runner for the Norris Trophy for the first quarter of the season or so until his play kind of dropped off a little bit offensively specifically. So I think that the Winnipeg Jets have a great team. I'm worried about the Vegas Golden Knights, the way that they've played at home and their goaltending depth. So that's why I have Winnipeg winning the series in 7. And again, I predicated my predictions before the episode started with you, Shades, by saying that there was going to be a good amount of surprises. And that's my first one, the Winnipeg Jets beating the first seeded Vegas Golden Knights.
Well, you definitely surprised me. Now, the only reason I'm picking the Knights over the Jets is because this Jets team strikes me as last year's Stars team, where they didn't really do anything of note to stand out heading into the playoffs last year. And then Jake Ottinger went off where they still lost in a Game 7 overtime.
Fair enough.
So that's what I'm basing my prediction on. So the first one we differ on. You got the Jets in 7. I got the Knights in 7.
That's right.
On to the Eastern Conference, shall we?
Let's do it.
So the first series we're going to talk about in the Eastern Conference is the Boston Bruins versus the Florida Panthers. And I feel like we've said every good thing we can about the Bruins this season. I mean, they finished with, did they end up finishing with 65 wins?
I think it was 63 wins.
They finished with 65. They did win out. So, I mean, we've said a lot about the Bruins, like I've said. They were playing great prior to the trade deadline. Then they brought in Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway. Then they brought in Tyler Bertuzzi. They got Pavel Zacha last offseason. And the Panthers, surprisingly, really didn't make any move of note during the season, but their big move came last offseason when they acquired Matthew Tkachuk.
That's right.
And, well, I'm going to keep this theme going. The Bruins finished the season 15-1-0 in their last 16. And the Panthers, this one got a little weird when I did it. So I'm going to say two different stats. They were 11-5-2 in their final 18, but they were 6-5-1 in their final 12. So they did get hot there for a while, but they clearly cooled down come the end of the season. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all because I really don't think the Panthers are going to win. I have the Bruins in 5. What do you got, Liam?
Yeah, I put Bruins in 5 on the bracket prior to the start of the episode. But again, I look back to the Lightning taking on the Columbus Blue Jackets back in 2019. mean, that was a series that was pretty much as much of a foregone conclusion as I think me and you are predicting this one to be. And I think that the Panthers are no slouch. And I think although they have not reached their expectations this year, I mean, it's ironic, right? Because you have the Panthers, who won the President's Trophy last year, being the first team in the Atlantic. And now you have the Bruins winning the President's Trophy this year. The Panthers won their first round matchup. I think that the Bruins will win as well, and they'll win in 5 games. I don't think it will be a cakewalk, but I think that they'll win in 5 games.
And I didn't even mention this yet, but Linus Allmark had, honestly, let's face facts here. He had an outstanding season. 50 games played, if I remember correctly, a 938 save percentage, which beat out Shesterkin last year, and a 1.89 goals against average. So he was a major factor in the Bruins finishing with 65 wins. But you want to talk about a hot goalie. I mean, that's it.
Right. And you know what? If you look at the other side to the Florida Panthers, their goaltending situation is a little bit interesting as well, because Alex Lyon has kind of led them in the final few games of the regular season. And I don't think you want to go into game one against the Boston Bruins with Alex Lyon back there. So again, Sergei Bobrovsky, Spencer Knight, I think is supposed to at some point in the near future come out of the player assistance program. So their goaltending is, again, a little bit up in the air, but I would expect Boston to win this series. I don't think Allmark's going to be as good as he was in the regular season. Again, look at Florida last year. They faced the Washington Capitals in the first round of the playoffs. The Capitals, who are this season, a year removed, are not in the playoff race and are undergoing a rebuild. The Capitals took the President's Trophy winning Panthers to 6 games last year and made that a decently close series. That's why I just don't want to write off Florida. But again, Boston is the most dominant team we've seen in quite a while, probably for regular season purposes in our lifetime, the best team, from start to finish in the regular season. So you can't undermine that. You can't undermine Linus Ullmark, like you were talking about, the tremendous head coaching of Jim Montgomery, and of course Patrice Bergeron as well, who came back for one more year alongside David Krejci, and they really created something special. Not to mention that they get Taylor Hall back off of the injured reserve. Dmitry Orlov has come in and fit like a glove. I mean, it's been an embarrassment of riches for the Boston Bruins this year. It really has.
Yes, it has been. And I knew you were going to bring up the 2019 Lightning against the Blue Jackets. And while that did flash through my mind for a split second, the only thing that I found the difference in immediately was Boston has a Stanley Cup to go back on prior to a collapse like that, a hypothetical collapse like that back in 2011. The Lightning, when they got swept against the Blue Jackets, there was no championship there. They had one finals appearance, but they didn't get the job done against Chicago. And two, to go back to your point about this being the greatest team possibly ever in our lifetimes, yeah, I would have to agree with you. The only team that I would really put even close to them would be the unfortunate lockout shortened season 2012-13 Chicago Blackhawks, where, I mean, they were pretty much the best team from start to finish that entire season. And this is basically version 2.0 of that.
Right. Agreed.
So Bruins in 5?
Yep.
All right. Well, let's move on, shall we? Next up, we got the Carolina Hurricanes versus the New York Islanders. And, well, this one got pretty interesting for me in the pre-recording conversation that we had, because you brought up to me that the fact that I completely forgot, Matthew Barzal is back skating for the Islanders. And I have done a lot of thinking over the last half hour or so on my prediction for this series, but I will get to that in a minute. Let's look at the moves they made during the season. The Hurricanes last offseason got Brent Burns and Max Pacioretty. Pacioretty, unfortunately, only played 5 games before suffering yet another horrific injury. And during the season, they brought in Shane Gostisbehere and Jesse Puljujarvi, while the Islanders last offseason brought in Alexander Romanov, which ended up being a pretty damn good move for them. And during the season, Pierre Engvall and the huge news of the Bo Horvat trade. So we all know that Andrei Svechnikov is going to be out for the Hurricanes, which just made this series much more interesting. Liam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably one of the most interesting series in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I think you can, separate interesting and entertaining. I think the Rangers Devils is probably going to be the most entertaining series.
Mhm.
Interesting. I mean, look, like you said, Matt Barzal is coming back for the Islanders. The Islanders have the second best goaltender in the conference in Ilya Sorokin, right up there with Igor. I think Igor and Ilya are probably tied up with one another. I think, Linus Ullmark is the best goaltender in the conference. So I think that definitely gives the Islanders an edge in that department. But again, I look at the power play, I look at special teams. I mean, the Islanders power play is woefully bad. And is Matthew Barzal going to be able to change that enough to be able to where you're going to be able to get production when you're up a man? I just don't think so. I think the Hurricanes, even without Andrei Svechnikov, who unfortunately went down in the middle of the season, I think they are still deeper, and I think they are a more well-coached group. I think that, the difference in goaltending isn't too heavy. I think Freddie Anderson was a goaltender who was involved in the Vezina discussion last year. Again, he hasn't had his best season this year, but he's been healthy and he's given, the Hurricanes some stability in net. So I think that the Hurricanes are going to win this series. I could see it getting extended a little bit, but gun to my head, I'm taking Hurricanes in 7 games here.
Interesting. Interesting. So, funny enough, I actually changed my pick during our pre-recording conversation. I have the Islanders in 7 at this point because I looked at, keeping this theme going, I looked at the Islanders' last 27 games. I told you this number was going to be all over the place. I warned you. I warned everyone. They were 15-8-4 in their last 27. And the Hurricanes, very interestingly, they were 9-9-2 in their last 20.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't call that stumbling into the playoffs as a number 1 seed, I obviously there's probably been worse, but that's a huge asterisk for me.
Yeah, they almost surrendered the number 1 seed as well, the division lead, to the New Jersey Devils. So again, it wasn't really the best stretch to end the season for the Hurricanes. But again, I look at their depth chart. I mean, again, we faced them last year, of course, us meaning the Rangers. And it was a tight 7-game series, and I would expect the same against the Islanders. I think they play very similar styles of, again, tight defensive hockey, not a lot of room. But again, I just look at the back end. I look at Jacob Slavin, we know what Jacob Slavin can do. They finally have some offense from the back end. Brent Burns and Shane Gostisbehere should not be taken lightly as a duo that is providing a lot of offense from the blue line. Brady Shea as well. Jalen Chatfield, we saw what he could do against the Rangers, sniping one on Shesterkin. They got a good duo depending on injuries or if anybody has to stay out between Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta. And yeah, good depth as well. So I think that the Hurricanes are going to win this series. I think that the Islanders have really been inconsistent throughout the year. You combine that with the woeful power play, the penalty kill, which has struggled as well. And again, just the lapses. And I just don't know along a 7-game series, if the Islanders are going to be able to compete with a battle-tested team like the Carolina Hurricanes. But again, we'll see.
I hate to do this, but you may have just talked me into switching my prediction back to the Hurricanes. I'm just going to look at the teams on paper right now. While the Islanders do have some good pieces, you're right. I honestly do think that Carolina still has the better depth, even with Svechnikov and Pacioretty being out, which still I can't believe that happened to Pacioretty. But
Shades, let me add this one thing here. These are 2 teams that really struggle on the power play. And one team made an adjustment at the trade deadline, and one team did not. And bringing in Shane Gostisbehere, I think it's really going to make a difference. And it could be whichever team wins the special teams battle wins the series. And I just don't see it with the Islanders power play. I mean, if anybody has watched Islander games with any bit of consistency, I mean, they're just better off playing at even strength. I mean, that's how bad they are. So That I think is an important aspect, despite Ilya Sorokin. Because if the Hurricanes need to win games 1-0 or 2-1, we know they'll do that. And again, you look to their last playoff matchup against one another. Wasn't it 2 years ago when the Hurricanes swept them? So similar core that the Islanders are throwing out there to the one that they threw out 2 years ago. Of course, Sorokin is the difference, but was goaltending really the issue 2 years ago? I would argue not. I would argue it was the depth and the goal scoring, and that hasn't changed. And the roster, despite not having Svechnikov, like you just said, is extremely deep for Carolina. So I just think people are writing them off too fast here. But I wouldn't blame you if you took the Islanders. But let everybody know, what's your did I sway you, or where are you at?
So I'm actually very glad you brought that up because I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, it may have been three, when the Hurricanes lost both, I think it was Sammy Vatanen and another defenseman heading into the playoffs. And that in itself swayed me on my prediction for them that year. And I ended up being dead wrong. So to answer your question, you did sway me back to the Hurricanes because
Okay.
they basically played with Pacioretty. They haven't throughout the season. And, well, I mean, I've been wrong before in this particular instance with players being out, thinking that's going to sway a series. So I'm going to switch my pick back to the Hurricanes. Thank you for talking me into that. And hopefully I won't make the same mistake again.
It's all right. We help each other here on Pucks and Brews.
We do. So in the long run, we both have the Canes in. I have the Canes in 7. I still have the Canes in 7.
I have the Canes in 7 as well. You know
Canes in,
what? Canes in 6 games.
I like it. I like it. Just that little dig at the
Bye
Islanders.
bye.
I like
Bye
it.
bye. Yeah, yeah. Got to throw that in there.
Yes, and I love it. Now, lastly, before we get to the Rangers and the Devils, we have one other series in the East to talk about, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. We all know what happened at the deadline with the Tampa Bay Lightning basically giving up an entire draft class for Tanner Jeannot, who, let's be honest, played pretty shitty after the trade for the Lightning. If I remember correctly, he went 10 games without a shot. How does that happen? But that's a whole other thing. And, well, outside of another depth move that meant basically nothing for the Lightning, where they traded Nemesnikov for a guy's name I can't even pronounce, the Leafs and Kyle Dubas went, holy crap. You and I were both like, I can't believe they're actually making all these moves. So let's go through that list real quick, shall we? They acquired Noel Achari, Luke Shen, Eric Gustafson, Jake McCabe, Sam Lafferty, Ryan O'Reilly, Connor Timmins, and last offseason, Matt Murray.
Mm-hmm.
God damn. This still surprises me going through all those names. Now, a big thing that was a determining factor in my pick, the Lightning are coming off 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals appearances in which they won the former 2, not last year against Colorado. As we've seen in every single sport, long playoff runs in consecutive years, especially when it reaches 3 or 4 years, they will come back to bite you physically at one point. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I have a stat for you, Liam. The Tampa Bay Lightning, in their final 24 games, went 9-13-2. They basically went 9-15. Now, I understand that they've kind of just gritted their teeth through the regular season before and went on to win the whole thing. I don't see it this year. The Leafs are 18-7-3 in their final 28. Things seem to be clicking more than they were immediately after the deadline. There's a lot of people on their last chance here. But before I give my prediction, I'm going to let you have the floor for a second.
All right. Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I will just play devil's advocate here and say that the Tampa Bay Lightning, in a lot of the years where they went to the Stanley Cup or had extended playoff runs, they did struggle to end the regular season. So this is nothing new, what you pointed out. So I just do want to preface again this conversation by pointing that out. But again, I think that the Maple Leafs made the better moves. I think that Tanner Jeannot was a little bit of a forced move, in my opinion, and it hasn't really paid dividends. I'm sorry, I hate to be the one to point it out, but Andrei Vasilevsky is not having a great season. Just saying. Again, I think the forward group and the defense, they go toe to toe with one another. I think that, this is a very, very good matchup and a very, very even matchup between these two teams on the back end and up front. But for the reasons that you mentioned, and the fact that at the trade deadline, Kyle Dubas went out and he acquired the big fish in Ryan O'Reilly, got the depth pieces that are going to help win a Stanley Cup in Noel Acciari and Jake McCabe. And who did they bring in from the bottom six as well from Chicago? Who am I missing?
Sam Lafferty.
Sam Lafferty as well. So I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win this series. And I don't even think it's going to go 7 games. I think they're going to win it in 6.
You and I have the same exact prediction.
There you
Leafs
go.
in 6. Great minds think alike, don't they?
Right on. Yes, they do.
Now the real question is going to become, how far do the Maple Leafs get? But I honestly do think that they're going to win this series. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win in 5.
I think it is a hot take because, again, just what the Tampa Bay Lightning have been able to do, especially in the playoffs over the last number of seasons. But I think that Toronto is clearly the better team, and this is their year. And let me tell you, if they don't pull it off, I'm worried. I'm worried about what the future might be in Toronto, unfortunately. So,
yeah, that's going to be a whole thing to keep an eye on. But, well, we're not there yet, so we can't talk about it yet. But I don't know. I just think the Leafs have it. Let's not forget last year. They were on the verge of winning the series in 6. And I think that, let's say the two teams were here last year. For anyone watching on YouTube, I have my hands up demonstrating something. I think the Leafs went here and the Lightning went here. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if they do win in 5.
I don't think it's a bad call at all. I think it's a little bit of a hot take, but I don't think it's a bad call. And I could see it happening as well. So
now imagine if they swept, the internet would lose their minds.
I think that the world, not just the internet, just the entire universe would just fall apart at that point. The Maple Leafs won around and swept the Tampa Bay Lightning. Oh my gosh.
Hey, I mean, both teams were kind of gritting their teeth by the end of the regular season because the matchup was set for what felt like months and the home ice was set for weeks. So, I mean, they weren't really playing for much, but I just think it's the Leafs' time to win around. And you forgot to unmute yourself.
And that one unmute happens once every single episode. But yeah, no. So I think that the Leafs are going to win this series, and I really hope that they do for Kyle Dubas' sake, for Austin Matthews' sake. And again, the Leafs are having a good season, and they made moves that should help you make a tangible difference in the postseason. And I think that they're going to do that this year, and it's going to come at the hands of the Tampa Bay Lightning. There have been a lot of glaring holes and red flags with this Lightning team all season, and I just don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think the Maple Leafs can beat themselves in this series to lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Now, before we move on, I just want to point out some interesting stats. The Maple Leafs finished second on the power play during the year, while Tampa finished third. The penalty kill, they're only 3 apart also, with Tampa being 15th and the Leafs being 12th. The face-off percentage, Leafs were 4th, while the Lightning were 11th. So even with, before I get to the goals for and goals against per game, this is still like two pretty even teams, but I don't know. I just have that gut feeling about the Leafs this year. So shockingly, with all the with all the Lightning struggles, they still finished ahead of the Leafs in goals for per game by 0.02, beating them out for 8th place, while the Leafs finished 9th. And goals against per game, the Leafs are better by about 0.4.
Yeah, no doubt that the stats are close, and no doubt that the depth is close as well. But again, I just think when you look at the trajectory of each team and how they've done up to this point in the season, that's where I would put them. So
yeah, so Leafs in 6. And mainly, I just want to see the Lightning lose early for once because I would get a little joy out of that. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I would say Leafs in 6.
Well, Liam, we've reached the final series, the New Jersey Devils against our beloved New York Rangers. So the Rangers obviously, famously, had a trade deadline for the ages, both in terms of acquiring players and the cap gymnastics and everything that went into that, which was made my brain hurt. But they acquired Vladimir Tarasenko, Patrick Kane, Nico Mikkola, and they brought back Tyler Mott, which, yes, I loved that move so much. But we're going against the Devils, who brought in Timo Meier, a team that, frankly speaking, beat us 3 times to, well, factually speaking, beat us 3 games to 1 in the regular season. A team, frankly speaking, that can and has outskated us in those 4 games. But I mean, I think this is going to come down to goaltending. And I will skip ahead to my prediction really quick. I think it's going to be Rangers in 7.
Yeah, I'll start off with my prediction real quick. I think it's going to be Rangers in 7 as well. I mean, we'll just continue the trend, shall we?
Yes.
Me and you picking similar results to the series. Again, I think that there's no doubt that the Devils have outskated us this season in the season series. But again, I said the same thing about the Rangers and the Hurricanes once we reached the bubble. And once that happened, what happened? The playoff experience for the Hurricanes outdid the Rangers, and they handled us with ease. And I could see the Rangers doing the same thing to the Devils, who again haven't been in the postseason with this core as of yet. Your Jack Hughes, your Nico Hischier, etc. So I think it's going to be an adjustment period. I think that the Rangers are going to win the series, and I think it's going to lead them on an extended playoff run. But the Rangers cannot, and I repeat, cannot take the Devils lightly because they will lose this series if they do. But I think just the edge in goaltending and the edge up front, and I just think if the Rangers can combat the Devils' speed and contain Jack Hughes as much as possible, they'll be okay.
Yes, but Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier and the aforementioned Timo Meier are not the only players that the Rangers have to contain. Because, I mean, dude, look at the Devils roster. Jesper Bratt having a good year. Eric Holla, he's a decent depth piece. Sharon Govich having a good year, and he's still only 24, which I could have sworn he was like 27 or 28. That's just me. Dawson Mercer is having a fantastic season for a 21-year-old. And their back end is, outside of Dougie Hamilton, John Marino's good. Severson, from what I heard, had a good season. Ryan Graves has been pretty good for them. And of course, Rangers legend Brendan Smith, another Rangers legend.
We'll see if Brendan Smith gets in.
Yeah. And they just signed Luke Hughes, which that's scaring me a little bit, because how many times have we seen a young guy like that, a high draft pick like that, come in and provide a spark that was needed to push a team around or two?
That worries me. That worries me a little
Yes.
bit. And the last time I saw it going into the playoffs, you know who it was? It was Cale Makar. And Cale
Yes.
Makar came straight out of college and he dominated for the Avalanche in the playoffs. So just something to throw out there.
Yeah. Now, granted, Blackwood's having a good season. Vanacek is also a pretty good goalie, and honestly, that's a pretty good goaltending tandem for New Jersey, if I'm being honest with you. But let's
Well,
look
one
at
thing that's interesting with the Devils goaltending is that Vitek Vanacek was injured late in the year, and they kind of gave Mackenzie Blackwood a trial run to be the backup for Vanacek in the playoffs, and he completely shit the bed against the Capitals and had to get pulled. And they called up Akira Schmid, and now it's going to be Schmid and Vanacek in the playoffs. And Vanacek's been injured at the end of the year, and he hasn't really been great. I think he had a 911 save percentage. So we could see potentially Akira Schmid in this series. So again, just a lot of interesting avenues that this series could go in. And I think the Devils goaltending is a very interesting storyline. That's why at the end of the day, Shades, I'm taking the Rangers to win, because Igor just makes that much of a difference. I think Vanacek is good, but has Vanacek ever been a number one? And he really hasn't, at least not in a postseason race. So.
Yeah. Now, remember when the Capitals won the Cup in 2018, how Holtby played miserable that entire regular season?
Yep.
And then basically went God mode for 2 months. They won the Cup, and then he went back to being terrible again. That just goes to show you, you never know what you're going to get from your goalies in the playoffs. How many times have we seen this? I mean, look last year with Jake Ottinger. Dallas didn't win, but he was the only reason that Dallas even had a chance.
Yep, agreed, 100%.
But with all this being said, I still think the Rangers edged the Devils out, because look at this team on paper. You have a top six consisting of Mika Zibanejad, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, Artemi Panarin, Vincent Trocheck, and Chris Kreider, who is arguably your seventh best forward, arguably. And you have obviously the kid line. You have a back end of Adam Fox, Jacob Trouba, Keandre Miller, and the glue that holds this defensive core together, Ryan Lindgren, along with a young and up-and-coming Braden Schneider. And you have arguably the best goalie in the world. How can you bet against that?
Yeah, I go position by position, just like you did. I look at it. I see a top 10 center in the league. I see a top 5 D-man in the league. I see 2 top 10 wingers in the league. And I see a top 5 goalie in the league. And I see a top 5 head coach, quite frankly. So you combine all that together, and I know you disagree, but whatever. I think Gerard Gallant, his track record speaks for itself. And he has really led this Rangers team to a couple of good seasons in a row here. But again, results speak for themselves, and we'll see what they do against the Devils. But again, they are just stacked at every single position. But this is the year. If you can't win it with Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko, with the group that got you to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow, especially if we go out in the first round. So that's why I can't sit here and give the Devils any credit or any chance.
Yeah, and notice how I didn't even mention the fourth line consisting of Tyler Mott and Jimmy Vesey, who is having, frankly, a very underrated season. I mean, there's not really a hole on this team. The only hole you could possibly argue is third pair left defenseman. That's the only place on this roster where you can arguably argue there's a hole.
Yep, and that's Mikkola, right?
Yep.
And Mikkola has been very, very good since coming over from the Blues.
Yeah, he's had his rough games, but
he has. But I think for the most part, I think he's slotted in nicely. He's a good skater, and I think he's helped Kakko a lot too. I don't think it's a coincidence that Kakko's season kind of took off right when Mikkola got here. He's been really good to end the season. I think Mikkola is getting in his head, maybe telling him to shoot a little more, which he has. It's that Finnish connection that maybe he needed. So it's good too.
Now, while the Devils do have the advantage on the penalty kill, 4th, and the Rangers are 13th, the Rangers power play, which I was kind of shocked, they finished 7th, and the Devils finished 13th. The reason I say I was shocked, because I remember that stretch where they couldn't score a power play goal to save their lives, and they honestly didn't really fall too far.
Well, I think, yeah.
That's why I was shocked there. And face-off percentage, we cannot crack 50% these last couple of years to save our lives.
Well, I think an interesting aspect of at least the special teams is that the Rangers have had a ton of success against the Devils on the power play this season. I think percentages north of 35%. in the small several number of games that they played head to head against one another. So that's an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah, and lastly, the goals for per game. The Devils had the lead by 0.19 goals per game, finishing fourth compared to the Rangers 12th. And the goals against is very close. The Devils finished with 2.71, finishing eighth, and the Rangers finished in fourth with 2.63. So I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk of a series at all for the Rangers. In fact, this is my series of the first round, just like Minnesota and I think it was St. Louis or Colorado last year was my series of the first round, which it ended up being. So I'm hoping I'm right in that aspect. But I think this is going to be a little bit of a dogfight, and I cannot wait to see it.
Going to be absolutely a dogfight, and it's going to be a tight, even series. It's going to be a frustrating series, probably for both fan bases. But again, I think the Rangers are going to win. I think the Rangers are going to win in 7 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they won in 6 games. But I don't want to put the cart before the horse here. Let's say that the Rangers are going to win in 7.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I am good with that. But Tuesday, it's the big day. Even though the playoffs start tomorrow, game 1 for the Rangers, Tuesday.
I'll be watching Isles Hurricanes tomorrow.
Yeah, I probably will be too, because I don't have work tomorrow night. Thank God. Thank God. But yeah, we did it. We got through our predictions, Liam.
There we have it. 2023 postseason predictions, Pucks and Brews.
And well, I mean, I unfortunately have to work the entirety of the last week of April, so I might not be able to catch every game, but you damn well better bet that I'm going to be recording and watching, even if I know what happened in the game. It's playoff hockey. I have to watch every single game.
Right on. Gonna set it by myself.
So, anything more to add?
I think that's it. I think again, we apologize for such similar picks, but again, leave your picks in the comment section. You know, if you're able to watch this video before the results of the series, let us know who you think is going to win. But yeah, I think we had some interesting pick shades, each of us. We'll see. You know, can't wait for Boston to go out in the first round. That'll be nice.
As much as I don't think it's going to happen, that's one of those things I would love to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're recording on a Sunday right now. The playoffs start tomorrow, today. Today as the day the episode is dropping, but tomorrow as in we're recording right now on a Sunday. But we're entering into the best time of the year.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Can't wait. NBA playoffs got underway yesterday. MLB season is in full swing. It's a good time in the sports world.
Yeah, imagine we go 2012 playoffs all over again where the Knicks and Rangers both make it out of the first round.
Oh, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah. The city will be buzzing again.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Yeah, and I know I have a couple boys that are huge Knicks fans, so they will be very happy.
And credit to the Knicks, Nets, Rangers and Islanders and Devils all making the postseason the first time since what, 94?
Yeah.
So,
and come January 2024, I'm hoping that the Jets make the playoffs too, but I'm getting very far ahead of myself there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got nothing else, and let's just enjoy some playoff hockey, shall we?
Right on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 41 of Pucks and Brews. As always, I have been your host, Michael Shades Faracino, alongside Liam the Chillmaster Godimer. And, well, I just said it, and I'll say it again. Let's enjoy some playoff hockey. Follow us on all of our socials listed in the description below. And this is going to be a phenomenal 2 months.
It's going to be a phenomenal 2 months. It's going to be a phenomenal series coming up. It was a great number 41 episode of Pucks and Brews.
Damn right it was. Well, enjoy playoff hockey, everyone. Goodbye.